The first time I saw Elena, she was holding a knife. Not in a threatening way, but with the casual, confident ownership of someone who knew its weight, its balance, its purpose. It was a putty knife, its edge caked with the dried ghosts of old paint and plaster. The afternoon sun streaming through the grimy warehouse window glinted off the steel, casting a sharp, dancing reflection across the dusty floorboards between us. I stood frozen, my own toolkit, a gift from my father, filled with mismatched, sentimental pieces, feeling clumsy and childish in my hand. She was my enemy from that very first second, not because of the blade, but because of the cool, appraising look in her eyes as they swept over me, from my scuffed boots to my nervously tied-back hair, dismissing me before I'd even spoken a word. She was everything I wasn't, assured, elegant even in worn work jeans, and utterly, infuriatingly confident. We were both competing for the same grant, the same dream, to restore a historic, decaying theater and make it our own. The Orpheum was a grand old dame, her plaster cherubs crumbling, her velvet seats moth-eaten, but her soul was a palpable thing, a whisper of glamour and ghostlight that still clung to the dust motes. For me, it was a sanctuary, a place to hide from the noise of a world that often felt too loud, a canvas for the beauty I felt but struggled to articulate. For Elena, I quickly learned, it was a conquest, a problem to be solved with logic and precision. Every day we worked in separate corners, the air thick with the unspoken war between us. The sound of her precise hammering was a critique of my slower, more intuitive process. The sight of her detailed, immaculate blueprints spread out on a workbench felt like a declaration of superiority over my own sketch-filled, coffee-stained notebooks. My thoughts were a constant, churning narrative of resentment. I'd watch her from the corner of my eye, noting the way she tied her dark, unruly curls back with a simple bandana, the efficient grace of her movements, the way she never seemed to sweat or tire. I convinced myself her quiet intensity was arrogance, her focus a coldness. I built a fortress of my own insecurities, and I placed her on the other side of the walls, the antagonist in the story of my life. She was the obstacle to everything I wanted, a living, breathing reminder that I might not be good enough, that my dream was too fragile to survive in the shadow of someone like her. The turning point, the first crack in the foundation of my animosity, came on a rain-lashed Tuesday. The city had been drowning for hours, and a leak we hadn't known about in the Orpheum's domed ceiling had become a deluge, threatening to destroy the intricate parquet floor of the main stage, a floor I had spent days carefully diagramming and mourning. I'd arrived, soaked and breathless, to find Elena already there, not standing over the problem, but on her knees, a tarp stretched tight in her hands, her hair plastered to her forehead, her shirt soaked through and clinging to her shoulders. She wasn't waiting for a crew, she was fighting the building's decay with her bare hands, a solitary soldier in a losing battle. Without a word, I dropped my bag and waded in. The air was cold, smelling of wet wood, old stone, and a strange, metallic tang of panic. Our hands met on the rough canvas of the tarp, a jolting, unexpected contact. I expected a curt nod, a dismissal. Instead, her eyes, usually so guarded, were wide with a shared panic, the cool confidence replaced by a raw, desperate energy. She needed help, and I was the only one there. We worked in a frantic, silent tandem for what felt like hours, moving buckets that grew heavy with dark water, repositioning tarps, our movements slowly sinking into a desperate, shared rhythm. It was the first time we hadn't been working against each other, but side by side, against a common enemy, time and entropy. After the crisis was averted, we stood in the damp, echoing silence, breathing heavily, the only sound the steady drip 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 from the now contained leak. The anger was gone, siphoned away by the shared exertion, leaving only a raw, hollowed-out exhaustion. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my enemy. I saw the tremor in her hands, the way her shoulders slumped with a weight that had nothing to do with the physical labor. I saw a woman, just a woman, desperately trying to save something beautiful. The fortress walls around my heart didn't crumble, but a single, Hidden gates swung open. That shared battle against the storm changed the weather between us. The wary silence became a comfortable quiet, then slowly, tentatively, bloomed into conversation. We started sharing a coffee thermos in the mornings, the bitter steam a new ritual. I learned the calluses on her hands, the specific way she held a chisel. She learned that I took my coffee black and that I had a habit of humming when I was concentrating. I learned her precise blueprints weren't a statement of arrogance, but a love language. She saw the building as a complex, breathing entity, and her plans were a map of its bones, a promise to honor its original structure. She, in turn, stopped dismissing my messy sketches, began to see the soul I was trying to coax back to the surface, the emotion behind the imperfect lines. She told me, her voice low and hesitant one evening as we sorted through a box of rusted hardware, that she'd found old playbills in the attic, and she'd spent an hour not just reading the cast lists, but tracing the faded ink with her finger, imagining the rustle of programs and the thunder of applause. The air in the Orpheum began to feel different, charged with a new, terrifying potential. I became hyper-aware of her proximity. The scent of her sawdust and sage and the simple, clean soap she used would reach me before she did. I noticed the way she'd bite her lip in concentration, the small, rare smile that would sometimes break through her seriousness when she solved a particularly tricky problem, a smile that felt like a secret gift meant only for me. My thoughts were no longer a litany of resentment, but a tangled mess of longing and fear. I'd find my gaze lingering on the curve of her neck, on the strong, capable line of her back as she reached for a high shelf, and a heat would bloom in my chest, so unfamiliar and intense it left me breathless. The space between us, which had once felt like a minefield, now felt like a magnet, pulling me inexorably toward her. One afternoon, we were working on restoring the main lobby's Art Deco sconces. I was holding a fragile, lotus-shaped glass shade, my hands trembling slightly with the fear of dropping it, while she soldered a tiny, broken wire. Her focus was absolute, her brow furrowed in a way that made me want to smooth the lines with my thumb. The hiss of the soldering iron was the only sound. When she finished, she looked up, and her eyes, those deep, guarded pools, were soft, the hard edges of the professional completely gone. "There," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a breath meant only for me. She didn't move to take the shade. Instead, she reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead, her fingertips grazing my skin. The touch was electric, a bolt of pure lightning straight to my core. My breath hitched. The world narrowed to the point of contact, to the startling warmth of her skin against mine, to the slight roughness of her work-worn fingers. It lasted only a second, but it shattered me. In that silence, without a single word, everything between us was redefined. The air was no longer charged with potential, but with a terrifying, beautiful certainty. The first kiss happened in the wings of the stage, hidden from the empty, waiting seats by a heavy velvet curtain that smelled of centuries and secrets. It was dusk, and the only light was the Ghost Light's single, naked bulb, casting long, dramatic shadows that danced around us like silent witnesses. We had been arguing, passionately, about the color for the dressing room walls, a deep jade green, she insisted, for its historical accuracy, a warm, buttery gold, I countered, for its warmth and light. The disagreement was a proxy for something else, a current of unspoken tension that had been building for weeks, a river about to breach its dam. I was gesturing wildly, and she stepped closer, catching my hand in midair. Her grip was firm, not restraining, but grounding. Our eyes locked, and the argument about paint died in our throats. The air was thick with dust and desire. I could see the pulse beating wildly at the base of her neck, a frantic rhythm that mirrored my own. She leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. I met her halfway. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a release of all the months of friction, all the unspoken words, all the bottled-up longing. It was heat and pressure and the shocking softness of her lips. Her hands came up to cradle my face, her thumbs stroking my cheeks, and a sound escaped me, a half-sob, half-sigh of surrender. When we finally broke apart, we were both shaking, foreheads resting together, our ragged breaths mingling in the quiet dark. It was an apology, a confession, and a promise, all without a single word. It was the end of the war and the beginning of everything else. I leaned in again, this kiss slower, deeper, an exploration of this new, uncharted territory between us. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer until I could feel the entire length of her body against mine, solid and real and trembling. This was the truth we had been building toward all along, with every shared glance, every past tool, every silent moment of understanding. Our world became the Orpheum after ours. We moved from enemies to collaborators to lovers within its sacred, dusty walls. We'd work until our bodies ached, and then we'd collapse together on a pile of drop cloths in the center of the stage, sharing a bottle of wine, talking in hushed voices as if we were afraid to wake the sleeping ghosts. I learned the landscape of her body by the dim glow of work lights, the scar on her knee from a childhood fall from a tree, the constellation of freckles on her shoulders that only appeared in summer, the way she'd shiver when I traced the line of her spine, the soft, vulnerable sounds she made when my hands found their way under her shirt, learning the rhythm of her breath, the frantic beat of her heart. She was a symphony of quiet gasps and whispered pleas, and I learned to play her like my favorite instrument. Our first time was there on that stage, under the vast, dark dome of the ceiling, with only the ghost light for a chaperone. It was not rushed, but achingly slow, a deliberate mapping of trust and desire. Every touch was a question, every sigh an answer. When I finally curled into her afterward, my head on her chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of her heart slow to a tranquil rhythm, I felt a sense of home I had never known was possible. One night, we uncovered a hidden panel behind the old concession stand, cleverly disguised as part of the wall. It led to a small, forgotten room, a technician's booth from a later era, filled with obsolete sound equipment and a single, dusty swivel chair. We cleaned it out together, our shoulders brushing in the cramped space, and it became our secret room. We filled it with a few personal treasures, a woven blanket from my grandmother's trunk that smelled of cedar and love, a small, portable speaker she brought so we could have music, old jazz standards that felt right for the space, a string of battery-operated fairy lights that cast a soft, golden glow, transforming the utilitarian box into a grotto of intimacy. In that tiny, hidden space, surrounded by the hum of the old city outside, we built a world for two. It was there she first told me about her father, a stern, practical engineer who saw her passion for restoration as a frivolous hobby, who had wanted a son to carry on his name, not a daughter with dirty hands and dreams of forgotten places. It was there I confessed that my dream for the Orpheum was born from a childhood of feeling invisible, of wanting to create a place where everyone, especially the quiet, dreamy kids, could feel seen and celebrated. She unraveled me. With every touch, every late-night confession whispered skin to skin in the darkness, the walls I had spent a lifetime building crumbled to dust. I told her things I had never told anyone, my fear of failure, my deep-seated belief that I was an imposter in my own life, that one day everyone would realize I was just faking it. And she listened, her fingers laced with mine, her gaze steady and sure, never offering empty platitudes, just the solid, unwavering fact of her presence. She spoke of her own pressures, a family that valued cold, hard success over artistic passion, the loneliness of always having to be the strong one, the capable one, because showing weakness was not an option. In her arms, surrounded by the skeleton of our shared dream, I felt truly seen for the first time. It was terrifying and liberating. We were two lonely stars who had finally found each other's orbit, and the gravity was irresistible. But the outside world hadn't disappeared. The grant was still pending. The competition, though unspoken between us now, was a real, external force. The fear began to creep in, a cold draft under the door. What would happen when a winner was announced? Could this fragile, beautiful thing we'd built survive if one of us lost? The thought was a constant, low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of our happiness. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes, a shadow of that old wariness in her eyes, and I knew she was thinking the same thing. Our love had been born in a bubble, a perfect, isolated world of dust and dreams. The real world was waiting to pop it. The letter arrived on a crisp, sunny morning that felt like a betrayal for its sheer beauty, a stark, official envelope that felt cold and final in my hands. It was addressed to both of us, care of the Foundation. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. This was it. The moment that would define our future or end it. I took it to the Orpheum, my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silent lobby. Elena was already there, waiting, perched on the edge of the stage. She looked at the envelope in my hand, and then at my face, and I saw my own fear reflected back at me, a mirror of our shared dread. We stood there, the gulf of our past and our uncertain future stretching between us, the memory of her touch still warm on my skin. I didn't open the letter. I just held it, my knuckles white, as if the pressure of my grip could change the words inside. The silence was a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. Elena took a step toward me, her expression unreadable, a mask of professional composure that I had once mistaken for coldness. I saw the flicker of it then, the ghost of the enemy I'd first met, the ambition, the drive to win that had brought her here in the first place. Was that what this had all been about? A strategic seduction to ensure her victory? To soften me, to make me step aside? The poison of the thought was instantaneous and paralyzing, fed by my own deep-seated insecurities. My hand trembled, and the envelope, that arbiter of our fate, fluttered to the floor between us, a white flag of surrender to my fear. I watched her look from the fallen letter to my face, and I saw the exact moment she understood my fear. It wasn't anger that flashed in her eyes first, but a devastating hurt, a wound so profound it seemed to physically stagger her. Then came a profound sadness that aged her face in an instant. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she closed the distance between us, but she didn't reach for me. She just stood there, her body trembling with a visible effort at control. "You think that," she finally whispered, her voice raw, breaking the long, sacred silence we had maintained for months. "After everything, you still think I am that person." It wasn't an accusation, it was a lament, a eulogy for the trust we had built. A single tear traced a clean path through the fine layer of dust on her cheek. She turned and walked away, her footsteps firm and final on the hardwood, echoing in the vast emptiness, leaving me alone with the unopened letter and the ruins of my own distrust. The climax wasn't a shouted argument. It was the sound of her retreating footsteps and the shattering of my heart. I had been so afraid of losing the grant, I had lost her instead. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in the prison of my own making. The grand lobby of the Orpheum, which had felt so full of promise and life just hours before, now felt like a mausoleum, a tomb for a shared dream. Every memory we created here mocked me, the echo of her laughter from the balcony, the shadow of our entwined bodies on the stage, the scent of her on the blanket in our secret room. The ghost light on the stage seemed like a beacon of my own stupidity, illuminating the wreckage I had caused. I had let the old story, the story of enemies, overwrite the new, more beautiful one we had written together. I had chosen fear over faith. I looked down at the envelope, a bland rectangle that held the power to break me twice over. With a shaking breath that felt like my first in an eternity, I bent and picked it up. I didn't care about its contents anymore. The grant, the theater, the dream, it was all ashes without her. The only thing that mattered was her. I tore it open, the rip unnaturally loud in the silence. My eyes scanned the formal language, the decisive print, not truly comprehending the words until I read them a second time. And then I started to run. I found her on the iron fire escape overlooking the back alley, the same place we'd shared our first bottle of wine, where she had first told me her name felt too formal and that I could call her Elle. She was curled into herself, her forehead pressed against the cool, rust-speckled railing, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I didn't speak. I had no words left that could possibly suffice. I simply went to her, wrapped my arms around her from behind, and pressed my face into the familiar, trembling space between her shoulder blades, breathing in the scent that was uniquely her. I held the open letter out in front of her, my own hands trembling. It wasn't a decision between us. The foundation, impressed with our joint vision and the remarkable progress we'd made collaboratively, was offering the grant to both of us. It was a partnership, a shared future. She turned in my arms, her face streaked with tears and smudges of rust from the railing. I cupped her face, my thumbs wiping the wetness away, my own tears now falling freely. "I'm so sorry," I breathed, the words finally breaking free, a desperate, inadequate offering. I was scared. "I'm so sorry I doubted you. I doubt us." I kissed her then, a kiss of apology and desperation and a fervent, unwavering promise. It tasted of salt and forgiveness and the bitter iron of the railing. She kissed me back, her hands fisting in my shirt, pulling me closer, anchoring me to her as if I were the one who might float away. It was a confession more profound than any words. We had faced the first true test, and despite my failure, we had chosen each other. That night, we didn't go home. We stayed in the Orpheum. We spread our familiar blanket in the center of the stage, under the gaze of the empty, velvet dark seats that now felt like a supportive audience rather than a jury. We lay together in the profound quiet, our limbs entwined, our hearts beating a slow, synchronized rhythm in the aftermath of the storm. The ghost light was our moon, casting our own private world in soft, monochrome light. I traced the lines of her palm, her fingers, committing their shape to memory all over again, vowing to never again forget the truth they held. "It feels safe here," she whispered, her voice sleepy and thick with spent emotion. "With you. It finally feels safe." Her words settled deep inside me, a balm on the raw, self-inflicted wound of our earlier fight. The theater was no longer just a project. It was our sanctuary, the witness to our fall and our redemption. The chaos of our beginning had been forged into an unbreakable connection in this very spot. We had walked through the fire of our own fears and emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, the scars a testament to what we'd survived. We fell asleep there, on the stage where so many stories had ended, with the quiet certainty that ours was just beginning. Her head was on my chest, my arm wrapped securely around her, our breaths rising and falling as one. It was the most profound peace I had ever known. The weeks that followed were a blur of shared purpose, now free from the shadow of competition. We signed the grant papers together at the same workbench where we'd once glared at each other over competing blueprints. Her signature was a fluid, confident script next to my own looping letters, the two of them existing side by side on the page, a permanent record of our alliance. We hired a small crew, and the Orpheum began to transform at an accelerated pace. The sound of saws and sanders was no longer a noise of solitary struggle, but a symphony of collective creation. We fell into a new, deeper rhythm. Mornings were for coordination with the crew, afternoons for the detailed, intimate work we saved for ourselves, the work that felt like whispering secrets to the building. We restored the proscenium arch together, my hands carefully applying the fragile sheets of gold leaf while she stabilized the ancient, crumbling plaster beneath. The silence between us as we worked was no longer charged with animosity or even with desperate longing, but with a profound, comfortable understanding. Our bodies learned to move around each other in the limited space without bumping, a silent dance of shared intention. A brush of her hip against mine as she passed, her hand resting on the small of my back to steady me on a ladder. These small touches became the punctuation of our days, constant, quiet reaffirmations of the bond that had almost broken. One evening, we tackled the massive, crystal chandelier that hung in the center of the auditorium. It was a monstrous, beautiful thing, caked in decades of grime, each prism dull and lifeless. We lowered it carefully onto a padded platform on the stage, a procedure that required our complete trust in each other. For hours, we sat cross-legged amidst its disassembled pieces, a constellation of crystals spread around us, cleaning each piece with a soft cloth and a solution of vinegar and water. The radio played a low, static-filled station of classical music. In the glow of the work lights, The clean prisms began to catch the light, throwing tiny, brilliant rainbows across the walls, across our hands, across her smiling face. She looked at me, a rainbow shimmering on her cheek, and her smile was so open, so utterly unguarded, that it stole my breath. "Look what we found," she said, her voice full of wonder, holding up a perfectly clean teardrop crystal that sparkled like a captured star. She wasn't just talking about the chandelier. She was talking about us, about the brilliance we had uncovered in each other beneath the grime of our pasts and prejudices. In that moment, surrounded by shattered light made whole, I felt a joy so pure it was almost painful. I leaned over the sea of crystal between us and kissed her a slow, deep kiss that tasted of dust and vinegar and a future brighter than I had ever dared to imagine. Underscore 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 underscore. The Orpheum is alive now. The lights are bright, the velvet is plush and red, and the air smells of polish and anticipation, not dust. Opening night is a week away. Sometimes, when the rehearsals are done and the crew has gone home, I walk through the quiet halls, my hand trailing along the gilded balustrades we restored together. I always end up on the stage. I stand in the center, under the warm glow of the lights, and I look out at the empty seats, imagining the applause. But the memory that always comes back, the one that feels more real than any future triumph, is from that first night after the crisis. The memory of Elena, not as my enemy, but as my equal, my partner, the love of my life, kneeling on a wet floor, fighting for something she loved. That was the moment I began to love her, though I was too stubborn to know it. Love didn't change everything all at once. It was a slow, quiet revolution, a subtle shift in the light, until one day I looked up and the entire world was rendered in new, brilliant, heartbreaking color. She was my enemy at first, but love changed everything. It took a crumbling palace of art and memory and showed us how to build a home inside it together. If you felt this journey, subscribe to Sapphic Tales for more stories where love finds a way.